Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Mahoney coming to you with my Tuesday tip, sometimes Wednesdays. Thanks, Jenna Marbles. I was out last night meeting with clients, so I was unable to come in and do my Tuesday tip. So here I am Wednesday morning. So our question for today that was posed after the last Tuesday tip is to talk about layers of insurance and primary and secondary coverage. So when you're dealing with a claim, if you've got a claim and it's just your insurance company, then you've only got one insurance company to deal with. And so you kind of know where that claim's going to go and what insurance company you're going to be involved with. But if it's a wreck, so you got two vehicles, or if it's a wreck with two vehicles, but it's a large company, then you can have different insurance companies at play. So that's where you talk about primary and secondary policies and coverage. And you can also have what's called layers of insurance. So let's talk about the layers first, because I think that's kind of the easiest. So you are involved in a wreck with a major trucking company, Schneider Trucking. Okay, well, Schneider Trucking is going to have layers of insurance. So what that means is first of all, they're going to be self-insured up to, like $1 million, $2 million, $4 million, something like that. So their deductible, when we say self-insurance, that's their deductible for the entire company for the entire year is going to be like $4 or $5 million. Then they're going to have one company that insures them from like $4 million to like $10 million. Then they're going to have another company that insures them from like $10 million to $20 million. And then they'll have a company that goes from $20 million to $100 million or whatever. Usually when you get into those big numbers, that's usually Lloyd's of London, out of London. Incidentally, insurance was actually invented by the Germans. They were the first ones to come up with the concept. But Lloyd's of London has been the longest standing insurance company for forever, them and Chubb. And, Lloyd's of London is the type of thing that would insure, Elvis Presley's voice or Cheryl Teague's legs or, things like that. So they'll insure all kinds of crazy stuff that other people won't, and they tend to do large policies like that. So, I had a case with a trucking company, and what we call the excess insurance coverage, the top coverage was Lloyd's of London. So somebody actually flew over from London in order to participate in the mediation. So when we talk about layers of insurance and excess coverage, that's what we're talking about. An individual can have that too. So like you could have your primary, your 250, 500 on your car, your liability and uninsured, underinsured, that could be through one company, and then your umbrella coverage could be through another company. So you might have your 250, 500 through St. Paul, and your umbrella could be through MetLife. So you had a primary and then an excess coverage. So the first claim would be against State Farm, and then you would have to go against MetLife for the excess if in fact the claim was worth more than $250,000 or $500,000. So then you've got primary and secondary coverage. So let's say that you're in a car wreck and it's not your fault. Okay, you can file a claim against your own insurance company for the vehicle. But they're not the ones primarily responsible. The other insurance company is responsible. Now, a lot of times, your contract will say that they will pay for your vehicle and then go after the other company. That's what's called subrogation, like we talked about before. But when it comes to a bodily injury claim, so a personal injury claim, you cannot make a claim under your insurance company until you make a claim under the other side's insurance company. The other side is primarily responsible, so you got to go to them first before you can file your claim. And this stuff is kind of tricky because you got to notify everybody and you've got to do everything with everybody's permission. So, like one of the things I do, as soon as I'm hired on a personal injury case, we immediately send a letter to my client's insurance company saying that we're making a claim on the uninsured, underinsured, and demanding arbitration under the uninsured, underinsured. That way, we know that we have in fact made our claim, because you have to make your claim within the appropriate statute of limitations. So we don't wait around in case there's a problem. We do it immediately. we're notifying you and we're making our claim so that down the road, if we do have to make a claim under the uninsured, underinsured, then we know it. And they're used to that from us now, so they'll send us a letter back saying, you guys are just making your claim right and we don't need to do anything right now. And we go, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And so we do that. But the other thing you do, so if you don't make that demand within 2 years, then you can't make the claim. So even if you pursue the other insurance company and you do everything you're supposed to do, if you file a lawsuit and settle it 3 years after the wreck, if you haven't made your demand under your uninsured, underinsured policy, then you're out of luck and you won't be able to file a claim against your own insurance company if, in fact, you had coverage and a big enough case to do that. The other thing that you got to pay attention to is you have to get permission from your insurance company to settle with the liability company before you actually do, so that you can then file the claim. So you get hit by a car, the other car only has a $25,000 limit, you're significantly injured, you got $100,000 worth of medical bills, broken leg, they put in a rod in your femur, that's a very common injury from an auto wreck. If you go and settle for the 25, but you didn't get written permission from your uninsured, underinsured coverage, you may not be allowed to make a claim under that coverage because they have to give you permission to settle. And a lot of times they're going to want some stuff before you do that. They're going to want you to do a little bit of an investigation to see if this person has any assets, to make sure that they weren't employed, to make sure that there isn't some other way to find coverage. Did anybody else own the vehicle? Were they running an errand for anybody else? A lot of times we do an affidavit from the people. We'll get them to come in and sign an affidavit to all of those things. So, in the event that we find something out down the road, well, now they've committed fraud, which is a basis to set aside that release. But you got to make sure you're in communication with your own insurance company and that you get permission from them to do all that. This stuff can all work in strange ways. So like I had a case years and years ago. My client was in a bad wreck, and this is back when medical bills didn't cost nearly as much as they did now, but she was hospitalized, had to have a lot of procedures, was going to be relatively okay. I mean, anytime you go through something like that, you're never the same, but was going to be relatively okay. And then ended up coming in and seeing me right before the statute of limitations. Well, I put together a demand packet, and the insurance adjuster called me up and offered real close to what I was demanding, which I did not expect. And we settled the case. Well, I got a phone call about 3 days later from an attorney for the insurance company indicating that we had settled the case for $90,000 and the policy limits on the case were $25,000, and the adjuster didn't have authority to settle the case. And I said to the attorney, I said, well, that's a unilateral mistake, not a bilateral mistake. And so next week we'll talk about the difference between a unilateral mistake and a bilateral mistake. And we will talk about reformation of contracts and all that type of stuff. That's something good for us to cover. But basically it meant that since I didn't have any way to know what the policy limits were, then it doesn't matter. I've got a valid contract. Well, the attorney said, look, I understand what you're saying, but the insurance company has canceled payment on the check, and you're going to have to file suit. Now, when I dug into my client's insurance policy and into the law, what I had to do in order to file the claim against the insurance company was first get permission from the uninsured, underinsured to acknowledge that it was a $25,000 policy. Then I had to go file a claim against my client's uninsured, underinsured coverage. And when I did that, and that's what the law told me I had to do, when I did that, I told them everything that was going on and what happened, because, clearly I was going to be successful against the insurance company. It was just a matter of, time. But the uninsured, underinsured decided to pay. So she had a $50,000 policy, so they get a $25,000 offset for the other policy, which, by the way, is something that the Illinois legislature should change, and we should allow stacking. So they paid $25,000, and then I had to go back and I had to actually file a lawsuit, and I had to go to court several times, and we had to go through some, and then we did finally collect. It took about 7-8 months later. But the point being, had I not gone and filed the claim under the uninsured underinsured, the courts would have told me that I wasn't entitled to file the claim then against the other company, so we would have been limited to a $25,000 recovery. So this stuff is tricky. You got to make sure you got somebody who knows what they're doing and has dealt with these different things. And that's why if you end up where you're in a claim like this, make sure you talk to an attorney before you do anything, before you sign anything, before you give any statements. Run it all by a lawyer and make sure that you're not messing something up for yourself. And don't wait. If you get involved in a wreck, call somebody right away so that you can do the stuff you need to do right away. Have a great Wednesday, everybody, and thanks for watching.